This is part 2 of the Virtualbox videos that I'm doing, and we're just going to recap briefly on installing it, setting it up, creating machines, and then some of the more advanced, I guess you could call them, settings that you can do, different bits and pieces. So assuming you're on Linux Mint, you basically just start your software manager, which I've already got running here, and you type Virtualbox into the search. If you see Virtualbox comes up on here, I'd probably take that method. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but in this case we'll just go Virtualbox, and you can see there's quite a few of them there, and there's all these guest editions down further, and it can be a bit confusing, but this is the one. This time it's come up at the top. It doesn't always come up as the first pick here. Virtualbox, and then x86 virtualization solution, Qt based user interface. This is the one I've been using on my Linux Mint Mate systems. So we click on that, we click install. It'll probably want some additional software, so we continue, put in your password, and there it is installing. You'll also need a .iso file, so if you want to install a Linux Mint virtual machine, you'd go to linuxmint.com and download, and click on the latest version, and here they are. Just scroll down a little bit. I recommend choosing 64-bit. If your computer is around 10 years old, the oldest, somewhere from around 2006, 2007, most machines became 64-bit. You'll have to work that one out. For this demonstration, I'm actually going to be using Peppermint, just so that it'll be more apparent when I'm in a virtual machine and when I'm actually on my host system. You could also go to Distro Watch and download something through here. You can see here's the list down the right hand side. There's Linux Mint. And we come down, here's Peppermint down here in number 27 position, which, as I say, I'll be using Peppermint for this demonstration. There's Virtualbox installed, and if we just go back, you can see it has actually installed some of this other stuff as well. So hopefully yours will work as good as that. You can see I've already downloaded a couple of .iso files here ready to go. There's Peppermint and Linux Mint. This is what Virtualbox looks like when you first start it. You can see there's nothing in it. Your machines will turn up down here on the left hand side, and you'll see when we get back to my host system that there's quite a bit of stuff going on there. You can ignore that. We'll walk through the process when we get there, and hopefully get you up and running in no time. As you can see, my Virtualbox has a number of categories here with different machines and whatever that I've been testing, and you can see I've got some Windows and some other Linux and some Linux Mint ones, whatever I've got, and one straggler out the side here. So we'll just go new, we'll create our first machine, and we'll call it Linux Peppermint. Decided to use Peppermint so that you'll know when I'm in a virtual machine which one's virtual and which one's the actual machine. So Peppermint will be the virtual machine. When you see the Peppermint desktop, you'll know we're in a virtual machine. But it's pretty much the same for most Linux distros. Most Ubuntu based Linux distros pretty much work the same way here. So we'll go next, and we'll give it 4. I usually give it that's 4,000 megabytes or 4 gigabytes. I normally give them 8, but we'll just do 4 for this one. Peppermint's pretty low on resources as well, so we'll go next. And of course that will depend on how much memory you've got on your system. If you've got 8 gigabytes, you could probably get away with 4 quite well. If you've only got 4 gigabytes, then you might want to leave that at 1 or 2. You'll have to figure that one out for yourself. And most of the defaults are okay, so we can just pretty much keep going next until we get to this screen here. And I don't know about Peppermint. I usually play with Linux Mint. and I usually get an error if I leave that at 10, so we'll crank that up to 20. In fact, I'll crank it up to 60 because I'll use this machine for something else to show you a dual boot situation a bit later on, so that'll just get that set up for us from the beginning. We hit create, and here it is. Linux Peppermint has turned up, so we can either click on settings or we can right click it and go to settings. And I don't touch anything in there. You could rename it there if you wanted to. It's Peppermint 10 is what it is, so we'll rename it just because we can. We go to system, and I usually give them 2 processor cores. My system's got 4 CPUs, and I give 2 of them to my virtual machines, and that leaves 2 for the host system in the background, and that works quite well for what I do. Again, you'll have to figure that one out for yourself, depending on how many CPU cores your system's got. We'll go to display. I usually crank that up because, again, I've got plenty of resources, so that'll depend again on what your resource situation is. And I enable 3D acceleration. Sometimes you might get a little exclamation mark turn up down the bottom here saying the settings are wrong, so if you do that, I'd probably just uncheck the 3D acceleration. Probably if I do this, yeah, there it is there, invalid settings detected. So even if I get rid of the 3D, it just doesn't like 2D one way or the other for most of these distros, so that normally works satisfactorily. Storage, we don't need to touch anything in there right now. Most of this other stuff's all okay. We'll leave that as it is. That'll get us up and running for our first machine, which will now start. So you could double click it or you could click start. And now we're going to browse to the file that I've downloaded previously, and it's in my ISO directory, and there it is there, Peppermint 10. So we'll open and we'll click start, and we'll hold down the right control key on the keyboard and press F, and that takes us out to full screen. We're going to try Peppermint OS Live, so we'll press enter on that. As you can see, the desktop hasn't gone full screen, and usually what I do to get around this is I just log out. Let's log out and log back in. And as you can see, the username for the live Peppermint is Peppermint with no password. For Linux Mint, it is Mint with no password. And they're the only 2 I know off the top of my head. So we'll just run through the steps of installing Peppermint, which is pretty much the same as installing any Linux distro on your machine. I'll probably fast forward through some of this. It'll just be a default installation. We'll just take all the defaults. Our first virtual machine is now installed. There's nothing more to do here, so we'll restart. The system's now restarting. It has actually come up full screen this time because we did a restart. That's usually the action that it seems to give me. If you've started the system from cold and you don't get full screen, again, just log out and log back in. And there we go, there's our first virtual machine up and running, installed into Virtualbox. And there it is there, installed. We'll go through a few other settings now. We'll begin with USB, getting access to a USB device. And we do that by right-clicking and going to settings. And USB, we hit the little plus on the right-hand side. You can see there's 3 devices in there currently. I've just plugged in my USB drive, and we can see there's now 4 items in there, and it's this one here, Alexa USB flash drive. Not all of my flash drives work. I can't get any of my USB 3 ones working, or I haven't yet. This particular one works, and it gets me out of trouble. I found USB to be a more reliable way of getting files into and out of the host, from the host to the guest, than using the file transfer in the settings. So I'm not going to touch on file transfer that way because it's simply not been reliable for me. So now we should see the USB flash drive when we start the machine. So we click OK. And we'll start up and we'll see when we get to the desktop we should have a USB. If we start our file manager, we should see the Lexar 8GB drive. There it is. And there's the files that are on it. You'll see if you bring your mouse down to the bottom into the middle of the screen somewhere, you'll get this little menu pop up. I prefer not to have it there because I'm normally shooting videos and it just looks a little bit tidier. So I'll go through the settings and show you where that's found. So the machine's running. I don't know if this will work, but if you right click on the machine and go to settings, and here it is down the bottom, user interface, show in full screen seamless, so it's called a mini toolbar. So we just deselect that, we hit OK. Now there's no menu there, and we'll bring the mouse down the bottom. So that just looks a little bit cleaner. And that's actually the first time that I've changed that while I've actually had the machine running and it worked. So I was quite surprised about that. Another feature I've found useful for what I'm doing with the Virtualbox is cloning. So if you right click the machine and select clone, and you can see Linux Peppermint 10 clone. So we'll go next. And we'll go for a full clone, and there it is. Within a couple of minutes, 2.5 minutes, that'll make a copy of this machine. Very handy for what I do with setting up videos. I can do an install, set up the machine the way I want it set up for the making the video, and then if I break something or if there's no undo button for something that I've done, I'm pretty quickly back to where I started. I can just delete the machine and use another clone until I get it right. So pretty handy feature. That only took about 2 or 3 minutes, and now I've got a clone of the original machine that has the same settings. So if we go to the settings, that it should have the USB already enabled. There it is. If we go to user interface, it's already deselected. So as I say, that's a pretty handy feature if you want to do something similar to what I do, or have lots of machines the same so that you can break them, just because that's good fun as well. If for some reason you want to do a UEFI installed, again you right click, go to settings and go to system, and here's the item you're looking for here, enable EFI special OSs only. Select that and that should get you up and running there. For dual booting, if you want to create a dual boot situation in your Virtualbox, we'll go through the steps. So we'll just rename this clone that we created before, go to settings, and we'll just call it dual boot, just to help identify what it is. And now we can see it's been called dual boot. We'll create a new machine, and this one we'll just use straight Ubuntu. And we'll go next. We'll give it 4 gigs of memory, and we'll go here. So if we go back, that's where you set your memory, and then you go next, and this is where we're going to make a change. We're going to use an existing virtual hard disk file, and now we're going to browse for that file, which will be this one here, Linux Peppermint 10 dual boot. So we're going to look for that. And we're going to find it in here somewhere, Linux Peppermint 10 dual boot. There it is. And there's the .vdi file, which is the virtual disk image or the virtual hard drive for that machine. So we'll select that and click open. And now we'll go create. And here's our new machine that's going to use this one's hard disk to do its install. So we'll right click on our new Ubuntu machine and we'll go to the settings, and we'll just need to give it another processor core so that it's not too slow, and we'll crank up the display, just our normal typical things that we do. And in storage, this step is a little bit different as well. We're going to, where it says controller, we're going to select where it is empty, and then we'll come across to the right where this disk looking icon is, and we're going to go choose virtual optical disk file. So this will be the .iso file, and there it is there in my downloads ISO directory, Ubuntu 1904. So we'll open that. So that is effectively the optical drive, the DVD drive if you like, and here you can see that it's the controller, the SATA controller is the Linux Peppermint 10. So this Linux Peppermint one over here above it on the left is going to be the hard drive, or the virtual hard drive, and this one here that we selected a moment ago is the ISO file. So we'll boot up to the live desktop of Ubuntu, and from there we'll start installing it, and we'll do the dual boot option when we get to that portion of the installation. So we'll I'll just take that off because it makes it look a bit fresher. And now if we start this, hopefully this should start booting straight away. And then we go straight into Ubuntu boot because I'd already selected the .iso file in the settings. So we'll pick this back up when we get up to the desktop. And in this case, we'll just go for the install Ubuntu option rather than going all the way to the desktop. And we're straight into the installer. So we'll go continue. Okay, we'll just take all the defaults there. Okay, you can see it's now, the computer currently has Peppermint 10 on it, so this is pretty much the same as if you're doing a dual boot onto your actual hardware. It's basically the same thing. So it's giving us the option to install Ubuntu alongside Peppermint 10. So we'll hit continue. And there you can see it's divided the drive space approximately in half for us. So we'll go across this way a little bit. So we've got about 40 and 25, something like that, so we can see the difference in the drive sizes for the purposes of the demonstration. So we'll go install now. This might take a little while to format its partitions and whatever it's going to do. I'll speed through that part of the boring part of it all. There's nothing interesting for us here, so I've hit the afterburners, put it in top gear, and we'll just speed through. The installation's finished, so we'll restart. And we should get a dual boot menu when it restarts. There's actually no installation media as in a USB or a DVD, so we simply press enter. And there's our dual boot menu with Ubuntu at the top. And there's Peppermint 10 down near the bottom. So we'll boot into Ubuntu. If we start the disks utility, we can see that we are currently, that'll be the Peppermint system there, the 40 gigs. And this is our 25 gigs for Ubuntu that we're currently on. We'll restart into the Peppermint system. Peppermint 10. And you can see the 40 gig is now the file system root, and here's the 25 gigs for Ubuntu over there. So there you go, there's dual booting in Virtualbox. If we want to create a group, we can right click the machine and go group, and where it says new group, we right click in there and rename, and we can call this one, say, dual boot, and we can drag the dual boot pair in there like that. Don't know if they'll still boot up like that. We better test that, I suppose. And looks like it does. And the dual boot did actually remain after I dragged them into their own group. However, because I cold started the machine, it didn't go full screen, so once again I've had to log out and log back in just to get full screen. So that's your groupings. By now you've got enough information to get a new machine up and running. You'll be creating virtual machines to your heart's content. I hope you enjoyed the video and got something out of it, and enjoy your Virtualbox.